Good afternoon and welcome to Inside the Outhouse for 2023. My name's David Maskell. I'm today's host and producer. Welcome to today's topic, which is, as I bring it up, when is free time on your program? What purpose does it have in outdoor education? So we're going to have a bit of a delve or a deep dive or a discussion today into how do you feel or how do you manage outdoor activities, whether it's in a camp or an outdoor ed context or a recreational program? And do they have to have intentional outcomes? Do they not? And where's the value and where's the line there? I'm going to throw to Cherie for welcome to the country, and then we'll get started.
So in the spirit of reconciliation, Inside the Outhouse acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend the respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.
Excellent. Thanks, Cherie. Yeah, we've got a little bit of a technical issue. People are coming in as they come into the meeting. Everyone's going to be Cherie Mullen. So just rename yourself and say hello.
We all want to be Cherie, David. We all.
She's just taking control of the session. That's excellent. First one of the year. We lost our Cherie there. That's okay. This is a topic that's come up. It's towards the end of week 8. It's the start of week 9 here in Queensland and possibly equivalent in other parts of the country. We've got Laurie from New South Wales and David Chitty from Victoria and a few other folks dropping in. And being in the field quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, especially around residential camps. There was some discussions within the oligarchs about what would be good topics to talk about, and intentional programming and its place in a day or a camp program structure, and how that works for the camp and how that works against the camp in some cases. So in terms of, is it a part of the programming between, say, 4:30 and 6 o'clock, where you give them free time, where you give your young people time to play, whether that's with footballs or cricket bats or in a structured game format, along with the usual aspects of maybe logistics of having shower hour and getting organized for the evening program. Is there a place for that in our current camp culture in Australia? And is it relevant, and should it be more intentional? And I guess since I brought up the topic and convinced the other 3 members to share the topic today, I find it's an amazingly funny thing that it doesn't matter which client group you work with. The fixation is always, when is free time? When is free time? So when are we going to be able to have some time away from doing structured activities or things that they feel are either outdoor education focused or things that they don't have control over? I think there's a huge amount of value in it in terms of being a facilitator, because it allows time for students to have that regular break from programming as they would in a regular schooling day. So in my perspective, lunchtime is also part of free time, as is if you have morning and afternoon tea breaks scheduled into your programming time. Having the same amount of time as they would normally be allowed in school to run around, to interact with each other, and to do what they do in an unstructured environment has a lot of value, because it gives them space from the adults in the group. In an outdoor context, you'll always find that you're talking a lot. I know that I instruct, I'm very wordy, I'm very deliberate. My tone is very monotone sometimes, unless I'm actually having to shout or be more direct with the young people who are being challenging in their behaviors. But I find it's a really important break for them, as it is for the staff. But it also allows some of the outcomes that we talk about, and I'll give you a key example of where if you're looking to build classrooms, so you're looking to build respect, resilience, responsibility, but you're also trying to build, say, a year 7 classroom. In term 1, it's all about building these year 7s who are coming in from different feeder schools. And in the first 5 weeks of term, that's definitely a key focus for many programs that I've been on. Giving them the time to play together, where they're not paired up, or they're not in a specific subgroup, or they're not having to do an activity where they're stepping out of their comfort zone, allows them to actually develop those bonds and those links that we talk about experientially. So I'm just going to throw that out to the group, and yeah, let's see where we can go from there.
Go on, Brendan. You're bursting to say something.
Oh, sorry. I must admit, I'll apologise, Dave. I just got caught by something else. But it's an interesting one. There was a case, a couple of things. There was a case some years ago about the concept of free time and the language beside it or behind it from a safety and risk management perspective. And I'm trying to think of the scenario, but essentially it was a really difficult thing for a school to say that it was free time because there was implications for that. And I think it was to do with a swimming session at a pool, and a kid unfortunately passed away, and that language connected to it. That's an aside. It's always something I'm interested in, and I've been working on a concept with my students around their intentionality and the concept of time and how we engage students, because there's the scaffolding component of it brings towards them a sense of they can understand the frameworks that they can work within, and then also the space that they've got to do the things that they want to do for themselves and have fun and enjoyment. And that works with the notion that this framework links to the idea of there's time for play, there's time for engagement, there's time for place, and there's time for space. And those things fit with the idea that if we give students some space to do the things that they want and a framework that they can work in, they actually feel more involved and more engaged in what they can do, and less a sense of we're always on. And I think that's a big part of the framing for lots of activities. Students feel like they're always on. There's always a sense we've got to be doing something. And that can sometimes mean that in the experience of the outdoors, it's like, oh, this is just hectic and I can't switch off. So two elements of that is that time for play is actually being structured in that. And there's time for play, and it can be an unstructured play. Just go out and have fun. Go out and do some things, whether that's a walk along the beach, whether that's playing frisbee, whatever it is. But that gives them an available time to go and do that and let off steam or engage themselves in that unstructured quality of being in the outdoors. And the time for space is also a time for just giving them time to go and be themselves without any sense that they've got to have done something or achieved something. And that includes plays, because sometimes play can be pretty difficult for kids who you have some anxieties around, but around engaging with others, that sense that you've got some space to do some housekeeping, for want of a better word, some time that they just hang out, drawing, doing whatever they need to do, touching base with themselves, hanging out in a sense in their tent, whatever it might be. And that allows them a sense that they can switch off from all the other activities that are going on. Obviously, those other times, that time for engagement is engagement in the activities, engagement in learning, engagement in bushwalking, rock climbing, whatever it might be, and giving a sense we need you engaged on this to engage now. And the time for the place is that sense of giving reverence or engagement to specific things of why you've taken them to that place. So they're things that I'm working on, and I think that fits within that notion of, is there time for unstructured play? And I think we have to have it. Otherwise, schools are cramming too much into it. And the outdoors is a different space to their timetable classroom. So we need to give them that opportunity to engage in a different format. Hopefully I've made sense. Sorry,
Hey, Brendan, would you mind just putting what you said, those four things that you mentioned?
Yeah, so there's time. So thinking in facilitation in terms of intentional sort of framing for the day, time for a place. So that place that you're in, giving over space. So whether it's going and watching sunrises, walking along the beach, looking for something interesting about the place, so that there's a reason why we've taken you there and chosen that place. There's time for engagement, and that's that engagement with the activities, with the learning, with cooking, with campcraft, with setting up tents, whatever it might be. There's a time for engagement, and we need you to switch on, or whatever, however you wish to frame that. And then there's time for play. And I've never been, and Dave will probably know this, I've never been a big one for riddles or games and being kind of the person to orchestrate that. But I think there is still some time for play, and however that is framed. because there's enjoyment, there's fun, and that might be. I've had great times. Just there's over in WA, there used to be these honky nuts, and it can be just playing, stacking them up as high as you can, or knocking them off a branch, or whatever it might be. So whatever that play is, and then there's time for space to give your students space to do some housekeeping, do some time for themselves to decompress after the day. And for staff as well, I think, Dave, you know, that time for yourselves, that time for the staff to go, where are we at? What are we up to? And time for that space is really important as well.
Thank you. Thanks for repeating that. I thought that was really good. I like the structure of it. So.
Well, and it helps just the new leaders, and this I'd be interested for Dave's ideas as well, but it helps new leaders kind of think about their day, because often new leaders can be thinking, oh, we need to be doing something with every minute of the day, and we need to be on, and we need to be involved. But often that feels like, from the other side, for students, that sense of, man, when do we switch off? But giving them some.
Can I ask, is that teacher enforced? Is that, you know, the brief that you get is to push them so that they don't have that downtime?
Well, I think sometimes it might be in the sense of, oh, well, we've got them out there. What can we achieve? What can we do with this all this time? So sometimes it can be, we've got to.
Yeah.
And it's like we're at the theme park, so we've got to row at every ride.
Mm.
I remember working with some Singaporean groups,
Mhm.
and I was like, you know, what are we doing now? And I'm like, you're hanging out underneath a tree.
Brilliant.
And they would see that. They used to call that slack time. I think, Dave, I took you to one of those schools, and
Wow.
slack time. And it's like, it's interesting. Oh, we're not doing anything. It's like, no, you just, and it could be a nice analogy to that notion of a tide as well. It's that slack time in a tide. Yeah, you're just at that
It's called
spot.
that nature bathing.
Yeah. It's just at that spot. Just relax for a while. You're at slack tide. So,
Mm.
but yeah, I think there's an element of that sense for young instructors or lots of people and teachers to fill time, and you've got to fill it. There's a great book. There's a great journal article. I think it's by Amanda Lloyd, about killing time. And that sense of always having to be on, but sometimes we've got to allow other things to go. Dave, Chitty, yeah.
I think oftentimes too, when from the school's perspective, when they look at like providers and they see this provider is providing 5 activities, whereas this provider is providing 3 activities, and they're like, oh, well, this is more value for money because they're doing more things, they're getting more value, but not necessarily. And I think that's something that's important for, you know, I don't know how you make them realize that the importance of the unstructured time, and having like, I really like what Brendan was talking about when you were talking about engagement. And if you're engaged all the time, are you ever truly engaged? Or are you just kind of going through the motions because you have to be there all the time? Whereas if you allow them a little bit of time in between and space to like think about what they're doing and, you know, enjoy some time to themselves, then they can re-engage. They have time to, like, especially with all the neurodivergence that's coming out these days, and the whole importance of you know, how kids learn differently, and how the kids are anxious and overwhelmed and stuff, and part of it's because they're scheduled to the hilt with every single possible thing. And I think that's definitely something that we can look at and talk about when we're talking about the importance of free time.
Sorry, I correct myself. Amanda Fittler, not Amanda Lloyd. Amanda Lloyd got some amazing stuff as well, but Amanda Fittler. Yeah, so killing time is a reference to the article. Hopefully that gets you somewhere. If it doesn't, I'll find a better link.
Thanks, Brendan. Mr. Chitty, would you like to jump in and give a perspective from someone who is a commercial provider? Are schools / teachers / heads of year level outdoor ed coordinators asking for more activities and less free time in a structured format, or are they looking for more free time and more time for space, as Brendan's been articulating?
Just a quick heads up, you're on mute, Dave.
Oh dear.
No, wrong Dave. Dave Chitty.
All right, I just had to take a phone call. Yeah. Before I mean, we tend to negotiate various programs. We're starting to look at trying to build some stuff in. We would tend to financially, we would probably, if it was a period of 2 or 3 hours, for instance, we'd have to build it on day one where the whole group did things themselves, right? And I might only have one leader there. Yeah. Okay. Building it in during the main, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the main part of the program perhaps would become quite expensive. If I've got 5 leaders, at $500 each for the half day, which is what I've got to charge the school to make any money at all, $1,000 a day ish, maybe more. That's $2,500 that the school's paying. They're not actually getting anyone for. So it's sort of, where do you build it in and still pay your leaders? You can't say, oh, well, you're not actually working. Yeah. They're going to run away. And of course I pay days. So, so it becomes a little bit difficult to manage, I think, the free time. Yeah. But I think it's worth putting in.
Do you think in terms of maybe, and this is more about a programming question, but it's sort of related. Are your clients currently, sort of since the pandemic, looking for half-day sessions, or are they looking for 90 minutes because that's what they're looking for in terms of deliverables, and therefore they get more bang for their buck? So 4 sessions in an afternoon as opposed to 2.
Well, I mean, we're an adventure provider, so what we would tell everyone that any of our sessions, the minimum amount of time we can run a session is 3 hours. We want 3.5 hours to take a small group of people abseiling or caving or whatever. Yeah. So we would do 2 sessions a day. We can fit 3 sessions in a day if we start at 9 o'clock and finish at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. But then, my leaders are also starting to earn about $50 an hour towards the end of that. Yeah. So that sort of starts to get a bit costly as well. Yeah. But it can be, it can probably be built in. Schools, for instance, try and do things of a night. We want to do something around the night. So of an evening around a campfire is a good time to let people have some free time, let people do their own thing, maybe before it gets too dark, or that type of thing. And maybe in the morning start a little bit later, give some free time. That's something we've been thinking about. Sort of say, okay, give the kids free time up till 10 o'clock, and we'll start our staff will run our programs from 10, 11, 12, 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. So we've still got our 2 activities for the day, but we're building some. I guess I've got to look at those types of things.
Okay. It's a really interesting conversation. I recently worked for a client where the school that they're contracted with have been with them for many years, and they've gone from a model where it was 3-hour sessions, quite detailed, lots of intentionality, lots of debriefing. But because they were only in year 6, they found, or the feedback from the school was, it was too long a session. In most cases, the students would get distracted, and therefore there'd be behaviors. And can we do a 90-minute rotation? So more bang for your buck, but less time to facilitate outcomes and learning. Anyone have any sort of feedback or opinion on that sort of model? Because it has obviously benefits and distractions in both regards.
I think one thing that always comes up with the idea of free time and or unscheduled time is this idea that kids, like I said, they're so overscheduled and so often told what to do that they don't know how to create positive experiences for themselves. And I think that's a big thing. They don't know how to play. And so they tend to be disruptive and distracting and find ways to get attention, essentially, is because they're used to having attention all the time. And I think sometimes when they don't have that attention directed or, you know, geared towards something specific, they don't know how to constructively build their time.
Mm.
That's something that, you know, it needs to start at a very young age, but it's definitely something that we can work towards, I think, at programs. And it's a big part of this, you know, because we want to create positive, unstructured time for them.
Mm.
One thing I think about, so the program I work with, we do for family camps. And that's actually a really good environment for it, because we have all the parents there to kind of like deal with a lot of the behavior. If there are behavioral issues, you just kind of refer to the parents. But there's a lot of unstructured time where you have like activities that the kids can engage in if they want to. So like, you know, at this time we're going to go for a hike. If anybody wants to join, they can. If they don't have to. And there's just kids running around. It's really interesting. The whole village atmosphere idea of it is you know, it takes a village to raise, and that's kind of what it's like, is there's all these families, and the kids just run wild. They do it productively, and like, it's really funny to see what some of these kids come up with. The last one I did, the kids caught an eel all by themselves. Like, I'm talking about like 10, 11-year-olds caught this big, massive eel, and they wanted to cook it on fire and eat it, and they did. I didn't partake, but you know, it can be taught, but I think it's definitely one of the bigger struggles that we face with this unstructured time is how to teach kids to play. I don't know if anybody else has any opinions on that.
Look, I think you're dead right, Cherie. All we've got to do is look at the data on the mental health challenges that our kids are seeing, and they struggle without that occupation of, whether it be screens or other things, of doing stuff. So, you know, I don't think any kid in the last 2 generations after Gen X, present company, has ever said I'm bored.
Certainly with secondary school kids, which is primarily what we're dealing with, if we had over time, early childhood getting free, like unstructured play, primary and secondary schools building in unstructured time, that's probably would then make it much easier for our industry to build unstructured time in from because it would be a more accepted practice. Certainly it's an accepted in early childhood that as a learning tool, but I'm not quite sure that the rest of the education system thinks that way.
Yeah, I get the impression from a facilitator's perspective that because the cost of camp or an outdoor program is so large to a school and obviously trickles down to the family involved, that they want to maximize their time. So having unstructured play or nature play sort of aspects to it, unless you can link it to a curriculum or to an outcome that they can justify, it's quite a difficult sell, I think, for some schools.
I think that's something that we can work on then, because I think there is outcomes that we can generate for, and if you needed a name for it, nature play is a really good where it's just you can be more unstructured and just I think
someone might register that. Someone has that registered, so be careful on nature play.
Well, you can come up with something, I'm sure. Yeah, the whole idea that there is outcomes for it, and we all know there's benefits for it. So I think that's something that we as providers need to advocate for.
Agreed.
Laurie, can I ask from your perspective as top of the food pyramid there at the peak bodies?
I don't know if I'm top of the food chain, but anyway.
Well, yeah, but like from the 10,000 foot viewpoint, is there obviously nature play has been quite getting a lot of publicity and a lot of funding and a lot of movement forward. Is there actually real engagement with that at the what I call the grassroots level, like at schools that aren't just independent affluent schools, but they can afford to put a nature playground in? Is it actually happening where schools are deliberately going out to seek the nature play activities, even if it's only at primary school still?
Good question, Dave. start by saying it depends on where you are, unfortunately. And I think the history of nature play in certain states is obviously a lot more embedded than others. So I think for those that have had it for quite some time, that conversation has progressed and progressed in a good way. Where it hasn't been a conversation for a while, it's still a huge obstacle. But there is that medium road too, where even we've got some sort of maturity in the conversation, it is still a struggle in getting some of that decision making and planning. I don't know who's aware of this, but I sit on the PLA board for New South Wales and ACT. So from a parks and leisure perspective, there's certain inroads that we're making in that space for people to really understand the connection opportunity, and whether that's nature play or older generations or into adulthood. But we've still got a long way to go, a hell of a long way to go in really understanding that aspect of how important nature play is, and again, for want of other terms. And even in New South Wales, you know, we're probably the only state that doesn't have a nature play, you know, registration or a program. But I've got to say, the conversations are really inspiring in the fact that we've got so many people at the table having the discussions about what the opportunities are. I don't think it's going to be long until we transpire that. But, you know, having the government conversations is always going to be difficult until it's in their policies. And that's where we've got to start. We've got to get it embedded in their policies, and that's when we start getting real results. We have this little thing called an election this weekend, which is going to make, certainly it's going to be very interesting to see where New South Wales lies after this Saturday. And we're all just hanging, just waiting in the wings to see what that's going to look like. But that could make significant differences as well.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. I might just pose one more question. Is free time, even though it's hard to define the values that we can get from that intentionally, is it part of outdoor education? Is it part of outdoor recreation, or is it part of just allowing mental health and space, as Brendan's framed? A space to a time for space from the program's busyness, because many programs I work on are very, very busy, and I know Cherie's probably had that experience as well.
Look, I might jump in here and then bid thee farewell. I've got to jump to another important meeting. Unfortunately, it's been a bit of a traumatic day across the board, but can I say from my experience, and obviously that is very limited to who's on screen, mine has been totally from a peak body perspective and understanding what's actually happening and where we need to make impact for change. And I think what you've described around that free time has an aspect in all three of those areas. I think it needs to connect with education outcomes, because if people don't understand what they can do to help grow their own mental health and their own responsibilities in looking after self, then we haven't succeeded. I think it's part of just general well-being, but also the education in the outdoors and how we can spend that itself. And as I've said to many different people, the opportunity of nature therapy in our space is enormous, and it will continue to grow. So the more we understand that aspect and bring it into the education area and the recreation area, I think we have for want of another term, a triple bottom line, and have a massive opportunity in that. But on that note, I have to bid thee farewell. Thank you so much, guys. Doing an amazing job. Keep it up, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you for your input, Laurie. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Take care, guys.
David or Brendan, do you guys have anything to add to that?
No, I can't get people pulling up and saying, "Are you okay? I see your car on the side of the road." Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think we want an industry. It's probably a good thing to get an industry-wide discussion and try and build some processes in, as Laurie was saying. Yeah, and certainly that early childhood nature play, but families are easier to deal with than schools and organisations, I think, in free time.
I think Brendan might have jumped out to take a phone call, but I think his words from earlier were very relevant and makes a great framework, and it's possibly a research topic for the future.
Yeah, definitely. I did put a few links in the chat there. Just talking about the importance of free time in general when it comes to kids, and I think that it applies. And David, you were asking, is it part of just general well-being? Is it part of this? I think like Lori was saying, I think it's all three, and I think it just depends on how you frame it. If the whole idea of being doing outdoor education is in the outdoors, and so if we give them that space in the outdoors, it automatically makes it, it is related to outdoor education because it's in that space. And I think not all kids have that opportunity just to go into that space. And I think that makes a big part of it, or that time away from electronics, and that time, as long as all that those distractions aren't a part of it, a part of that free time, then I think that it definitely ticks a lot of those boxes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I guess becomes a bit of an issue is that schools and teachers are terrified of not supervising their students if something goes wrong. Whereas if you're going to have free time and allow people to go and wander around the bush, or maybe might set some boundaries, but that's a hard thing for schools to cope with, the fact that students are not going to have someone sitting over the top of them making sure they don't fall out of a tree or the like.
Go on.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say, I can see many examples in my past of having incidents and kids coming back to the first aid station during free time because the tag game's been too rough, or they've been hit in the head by the football or something like that. And so there's definitely a risk management aspect to free time that possibly does need to be considered, and maybe isn't well considered because it's not programmatically assigned into a risk management context, and it's something that schools and providers definitely need to be aware of, I guess, and for that matter, instructors who might still be physically on site or present or on call even for activities in the evening.
Yeah, I think that the whole idea, just because it's unstructured play doesn't mean there's no structure around it or no boundaries to it. And I think that's something we need to emphasize when we're talking to schools or when we're talking to clients and everything, is the understanding of what actual unstructured time is, and when we're talking to our staff, because they need to understand too, just because it's unstructured doesn't mean that they're not on call, that they're not responsible. And I think that's, it's kind of changing the idea around what free time and unstructured play is, and making sure that people understand it as a whole. Brendan, did you have anything you wanted to add before? Oh, we can't hear you.
I'm also dealing with a little bloke that's trying to see whether he can come into my picture or not.
I can see that.
So no, I guess that's the real sense of it. I guess apologies, I had to take a call, but I found one of the things that I've missed a fair bit of the conversation. One of the things that I found with groups that I've worked in terms of that, what happens when we get to camp, what happens to, and it's probably, that unstructured is often leading with some enthusiasm about how about we go and do this? Because, how about we go and have a look over the top of that hill? How about we go down to the river? How about we do those things? And then kind of giving them a framework to go and be down there and permission to even go and do that. Then kind of just stepping back a little bit and giving them some space to that happening. And maybe that is obviously very different to kind of the framework of a residential camp and what that looks like on, but certainly on some of those expeditions and some of those other times that kind of gave them license to go, it's all right to go for a wander. It's all right to do some other stuff. So, but I'm not sure whether that fits within the rest of your conversation, talking about unstructured time. So.
No, I think that was really good. Well, if anybody has anything else pertinent to say, we might just cut this session a bit short today. It's a good session to be for our first one back in 2023, and kind of much lead into it. Our next session should be on the 17th of April. So hopefully you guys can join us again then. If you know anybody who might be interested in joining for these sessions, please spread the word about Inside the Outhouse. And it's just a great opportunity. You know, we've been discussing a lot about presenting at the APAC AEE conference that's coming up. And one thing that we've talked about, what we want to talk about is, you know, how beneficial these type of forum is, you know, how many other opportunities do you have to talk to heads of, you know, Outdoor New South Wales, ACT, or, you know, sometimes we get some of the other heads. I think it's a really kind of even playing field for people in the field versus, you know, all the way up the top of the pyramid, as David mentioned earlier. So definitely spread the word out that this is happening and that people come in and have their say.
I've got an idea for a subject further along the